Hi, we're continuing along in hormones. This is part 7, and we've been talking about hormones of the pituitary gland. And we talked about posterior pituitary gland secreting ADH and oxytocin. Then we moved on to talk about the anterior pituitary secreting growth hormone, and that's where we ended on the last video. And now I move on to prolactin. So we're going to talk about 6 hormones of the anterior pituitary, and we're on number 2, which is prolactin, which is a peptide. And what it does is stimulate milk production in the breast. So the sequence here that we see in the diagram is going to have that coloration, remember, of a stimulus in yellow and an integrating center in the pink color, some sort of efferent pathway to an effector that gives some sort of systemic response. So prolactin, the secretion of prolactin is controlled by another hormone that's called prolactin inhibiting hormone, PIH. So what does PIH do? It's going to stop the production of milk in the breast when it's not necessary, when it's not time to be producing milk in the breast. So that hormone is going to be sort of overriding the production of milk production until you remove that inhibiting hormone. And by removing the inhibiting hormone, that's when milk production will increase. So in late pregnancy, prolactin levels are going to rise. They're going to rise about 10 times. And the inhibiting hormone, the prolactin inhibiting hormone, is going to drop. So I've broken down this picture here in the next slide so that you can see it better. But we're going to have this integrating center here, which is the hypothalamus. And in the hypothalamus, the boss, remember I always call it the boss, is going to be this inhibitory hormone, the PIH, that's going to inhibit the production of prolactin. So until we cut that inhibition off, we're not going to make any prolactin at all. I've enlarged this. So here's the high brain center. We can either go towards the inhibition or not. We can remove the inhibition, in which case then the stimulus would come to the anterior pituitary to actually produce more prolactin. At the same time, the other thing that's happening is the posterior pituitary then is stimulating oxytocin. And do you remember what oxytocin was? It's stimulating milk ejection. So both of those are going to have to work together, correct? One is making more milk, and then the other is the milk ejection. Notice that this is a neuron, an oxytocin neuron. So it's producing a hormone. So it's called a neurohormone. Okay, let's go to the next section of this, which is once that inhibition is removed and once prolactin is manufactured, then that prolactin is going to manufacture more of that milk in the breast, and that oxytocin then is going to stimulate smooth muscle contraction, and that milk is going to be ejected. So there are other mechanisms like the actual suckling of the baby that's going to stimulate mechanoreceptors in that breast in order to stimulate that ejection of that milk, to stimulate oxytocin. Okay, so those two are going to work together. For now, we're just concentrating on prolactin increasing the manufacturing of milk in the breast. And it's going to be under the influence of the other hormone, which inhibits it. So how is it inhibited? How is that inhibitory hormone, those levels, how are they dropping? Well, after delivery, the baby's just been born, estrogen and progesterone levels drop. And in that dropping of those levels, that is going to trigger the drop in the prolactin inhibiting hormone. You're going to remove the inhibition and start producing milk in the breast. And then, as I said, suckling is going to reinforce the inhibition. Remember, this takes a little bit. Right after delivery, that inhibition isn't instant. It's a few days before essentially mother's milk comes in, is sort of the vocabulary used. And that's because this is going on. The inhibition now started, and then the breast is going to start making milk. Okay, so we've talked about growth hormone. We've talked about prolactin. Now we're going to talk about 4 other ones to make up the total 6 that are produced by the anterior pituitary. Those 4 other ones don't have an inhibiting hormone that kind of holds it in place. What are they? The first one is thyroid stimulating hormone, TSH. TSH does what? It comes from the pituitary. It stimulates the thyroid to then secrete, thyroxine. And thyroxine is a hormone that's going to alter metabolic rates in your body, all sorts of metabolism. So anything that you think of your basic metabolic rate, that changes with thyroxine. So you know someone with hyperthyroidism is someone who's releasing a lot of thyroxine. Hypothyroidism is too little thyroxine, and those symptoms are very different. One is sort of the hyper person who does a lot, doesn't tire, sleeps very little, eats a lot, and never gains weight. That is hyperthyroidism. Hypothyroidism is a condition where the individual doesn't eat a whole lot, but their metabolic rate is slow. They gain a lot of weight. They're a little lethargic. That is hypothyroidism. All right, second hormone, adrenocorticotropic hormone. Now, what does this hormone do? It stimulates the adrenal cortex to secrete cortisol. And cortisol is your stress hormone. It's the one that's going to leave you alert in case it's some sort of emergency, and then you're ready. And so how are you ready? Well, you increase your blood pressure a little bit, you increase your blood sugar so that you can run, you can do what you need to do. Firefighters, especially during now, have high cortisol levels because they're sort of on this alert of working a fire, right? Okay, let's go to third. Third is the follicle stimulating hormone, FSH, and that is going to stimulate the ovary to mature a follicle. So within the ovary, it's going to actually prepare an egg for ovulation. Within the testes, it's going to prepare sperm to be ejaculated. So you need to manufacture that cell through meiosis. So notice in all of these, you're going to have the hypothalamus dictating something to the pituitary gland. The pituitary gland secretes a second hormone that then affects another gland, like the thyroid or the adrenal cortex or the ovary, to then release another hormone that does its thing or does it whatever behavior that I've been describing. Let's see the fourth one. The fourth one is luteinizing hormone. So luteinizing hormone then coming from the pituitary is going to stimulate the ovary to initiate ovulation and the testes to produce testosterone. So do you see the sequence of events? It's always hypothalamus affects the pituitary, which then releases a hormone that affects yet a different organ. As a summary slide, I put in 6 hormones released by the posterior pituitary, GH, prolactin, they have inhibitory hormones too, and then these 4 that we just talked about. 2 hormones released by the anterior pituitary were ADH and oxytocin. Portal systems are important. They are a set of capillaries that forms a direct connection between the hypothalamus and the pituitary. So essentially, it's like their own little network of hoses. And what that is named is the hypothalamic hypophyseal portal system. Why do we need that? Well, think of it in the brain. The hypothalamus and the pituitary are very close together. They're very close. It doesn't make sense to put that hormone into circulation, have it go throughout the whole body, all the way down to your toes, all the way back up again to get to the pituitary that was right next to the hypothalamus. Makes more sense to have a direct connection between those two. So that's what I'm telling you here. It connects the hypothalamus and the pituitary directly. I'll show you a picture. This is in the brain. And you have the hypothalamus, and down here the pituitary that sits inside the sella turcica, remember? And they're very close together. So if I'm going to release something from the hypothalamus that needs to affect the pituitary, then it makes sense to have its own hoses here where it can put it into circulation, go straight to its target rather than have to go to an artery, travel all the way through your body, as I said, down to your toes and back up again. Okay, so in number 2, it's saying portal vessels carry the trophic hormones. A trophic hormone is a hormone that's going to stimulate the pituitary to release something. So it's going to carry that trophic hormone directly to the anterior pituitary. Then those endocrine cells release their own hormones into the second set of capillaries for distribution to the rest of the body. Okay, so again, 1, hypothalamus, 2, pituitary. Then the pituitary is going to go 3 to the target organ, and then that target organ is going to have the response. Okay, that's a sequence of events. That's where we're going to stop. One more group of slides left for hormones. Thanks.